So now that we've had a chance to talk about some of the basic chart types, let's go ahead and build out a bar chart using D3. So the first thing that we're going to need is our data, and then we'll make some choices about the encodings. So here we have Anscombe's quartet from where we left off. Just for an easier data set for us to make a bar chart out of, we're just going to take some simple data elements here. Quick note, before we had this SVG element in the page, we still have that there. And as a reminder, D3 is loaded through CodePen for us. Right, so from before, the first thing that we want to do to go ahead and start is we want to make a selection. So we're going to go ahead and grab that SVG element that's in the page. So we'll D3.select that SVG, right? And we have our SVG element. Right, we can go ahead and check what we have here. This should be the HTML SVG element. And just for a sanity check, of course, right, we can go ahead and look at that SVG that we have, right? Make sure everything is working right with D3, right? So we can open the web inspector and take a look here, right? And here we go, right? So this is our D3 selection. So we're rocking and rolling. We have the SVG. So the first thing we want to do is think about the encodings. So we have these 6 data elements, and we're going to start by encoding the position of each piece of data along Y, right? And then the width of the bars is going to be our data element. So their order, or their order in this list is going to encode their Y position. And the data element itself for 12, 15 is going to encode the width. So we're making a bar chart. We're going to use rectangle elements. So to get started again, we're going to go ahead and select those rectangle elements, or make a selection to get started with. Right, so we're going to call this bars, and we're going to do a D3.select all of the rectangle element, right? We're going to do that inside of the SVG, of course. So SVG.select all rect. We didn't need to select all, and we also really didn't need to call it a rect element. Again, these are just syntax so that when we come back and look at this, okay, we're starting to get all the rectangle elements, right? And the thing to remember here again is this is an empty selection, right? So this is empty. Didn't really matter what we did, but we've got an empty selection to start with. So we're going to go ahead and apply the data here. So we're going to take our bars. We're going to do a data bind. We'll bind these 6 data elements, right? That ender selection is going to go ahead and, sorry, a little ahead of ourselves. We're going to use data to bind the data elements, right? And that's going to give us an enter selection with 6 new elements. We had an empty selection. We bound 6 data elements to it, an array of length 6. It's going to give an enter selection with 6 new elements, right? The update selection is empty, and the exit selection is also empty. So here we're going to go ahead and enter to create those new elements. So we've got the new elements now loaded up in our selection, and we're going to append those. We're going to append rectangles. So now we have our new recs, right? And we can go ahead and save this out. These are our new bars, right? From our enter selection. Just to say we don't have to chain everything on. We could keep chaining after the append rec, right? So for these new bars, we can go ahead and use the data which we've applied to them to set some of the properties. So for rectangle, as you recall, we'll need the X, Y, width, and height, right? So to first start, let's go ahead and do those. So new bars.attribute, let's go ahead and set the X position, right? We wanted the X position to be, X position here, all our bars are going to be aligned on the left, right? And we're going to let the width specify their position. So for the X attribute, we can just go ahead and set that to 0, right? We're going to need to set the Y attribute. And the Y attribute, this one is a little trickier here, right? We're going to go ahead and set the Y attribute to be the vertical position where here we're ordering them, right? So for free in this callback attribute, right, we know that we get D and I. We get the 2 variables, right? D being the data element we've bound, 4, 12, 15, etc., and I being the index, right? So we want to set them in order. So we'll go ahead and set their Y position based on the index, right? And we might, offset them by 20. So here we're going to set the Y to be 0, 20, 40, because each data element is going to have the index 0, 1, 2, etc. If we wanted to be a little more specific, right, we could go ahead you know, create a new variable out front that we want to call bar height, right? And we can set the bar height to be 20, right? And then what we might want to do is set the y position to be bar height plus 2 to give them a little space in between, right? So now we set the y position, the x position. We're going to need the width and the height, right? So let's set the width. The width we wanted to style based on, we want to actually use the data here to give us width. So here we can go ahead and just use the data element itself, right? We know it has an FGG that's, you know, 600 by 600. So we have some space, more than there are data points here. So what we can do here is we can go ahead and set this to be D. Maybe we'll multiply them by 3, right? So that means the biggest bar here is going to be 160 pixels wide. So here we're encoding pixels. So we set the width, and we're going to set the height, right? We just conveniently set bar height, right? So for all these, we can set the width or the height to be bar height, right? And there we have it. We have new bars, and boom, we've got them, right? We've set the x, y, width, and height, right? We might also set the fill attribute, right? That'll give us, you know, maybe something a little nicer looking. We can give ourselves a nice blue here, right? A little bit of a harsh blue. We can do a little bit more. So we have these new bars, right? And this is where we appended a rectangle. So you can see we set the bar height explicitly, we set the width explicitly. We can tune this up a little bit. The way that we did this is in this new bar selection, we stored the rectangles, right? So what we could have done, in fact, is stored it here, right? And then on our new bars, right, we could have appended a rectangle, right? So this was our enter selection, right, where each was bound to the data, right? So this is the new bars here is going to be our list of empty elements to create. So here we appended a rectangle, right? If we wanted to give these some labels, right, we could go ahead and take this new bar selection and we could add some text, right? So let's give them a little text element at the end of the bar with the actual data value, right? So here we go ahead and append a text element, right? So we're going to go ahead and append a text, right? There are a few things that we can set on the text, right? We can give it an x and a y position. Where here, x, right? Maybe we'll go ahead and set the x to be the width of these bars here, right? So we want to put it out here by the end of the bar, right? So we can go ahead and do that. So we've set the x, we'll give it a y position. Get a little syntax here. Set the y position, and again, you know, these are going to have the same d and I attributes, right? So here y, we'll set this to be the same. Again, we're duplicating a little bit of code. So if we want to be a little cleaner, we could have used something like a group element and put these both inside. But here, let's be straightforward, right? We've got new text elements. We'll give them an x, y, right? And text elements also need the text, right? So we're just going to return D. So we're just going to give it that data element, right? So there's our text pieces, right? We added one for each of our bars, right? We couldn't go ahead and style them here, right? You can see that we're actually appending. So this 42 is for the last bar, right? It looks like it got set with an x, the length of the bar, and a y, right? The amount to go down on the bar. So it seems like it's set to, you know, put the text on the bottom left corner of the text. We can go ahead and set that up to be a little nicer. To start, you know, we could actually set the y to be I plus 1, right? So that we're setting them right at the end of that text element, right? And we don't need to give them an offset, right? So here we set them right at the top of the text element. Beyond that, we can be a little cleaner in how we're specifying the layout of these by using some CSS, right? So we can go ahead and start to make our text look a little bit nicer. We could also just do this using the style in JavaScript, but here we'll do it in just one line. So what we can do is we could take our text elements, right? And we'll go ahead and set their fill to be white. We want to put them inside the bars, right? So we'll go ahead and set their fill to be white, right? We lost them, right? And now we're going to want to go ahead and set the the alignment positions, right? I don't remember all these off the top of my head, so we'll go back to our SVG reference. We talked about the MDN reference before, and the other reference you can go look at is the actual SVG spec at W3C. This is a little more readable, right? So let's go find our text element, and we'll see the styles that we can set on this. So we're going to set its right align property. So here's our text anchor, right? DX and DY. So we can go ahead and set that text anchor property, right? Start, middle, and end. We want to put them in, inside of our bars, right? So we can go ahead and set that text align to be end, right? And they might pop into our bars. So let's see if we did that right. Right? So we want to set the text anchor. Yep. Text anchor attribute. So these are going to pop them inside, right? And we can also set some other of these properties. So one of those would be like vertical baseline, right? And we can set this to be the middle, right? So this should actually set where they're offset. If we want to see how some of these changes look before just typing them in here, we can go ahead and again use the web inspector here, right? This is pretty handy. We can go ahead and grab these text elements, right? And using the CSS here, looks like vertical baseline wasn't what we want. Vertical align, right? We can set them to vertical align in the middle, right? So we can go ahead and apply some of those styles dynamically. So this is editing our text alignment here, right? So we can set that, right? We can set the baseline. So dominant baseline is another one that you might find to be useful, right? If we set that to be the middle, boom, we've got these in the middle of the bar, right? If we wanted to do, we could continue styling them in CSS. You can keep going till you see fit. And so here what we could do is give them a little offset on the right. So you might want to give them a little like padding right, so that they're not right at the end of the bars. We could have specified this in DS and the D3 as well, right? So we can move them a little bit left if we want. All right, so we went ahead and build a very basic drawer chart. We don't have any labels or any axes yet, but we're able to take our data, bind it directly to some elements, and use the data itself to set the position and the style of those. You can, with D3, one of the things that's great now is you can really do anything with these elements. So we could go ahead and set the color based on a secondary data attribute if we wanted, and we're off and going.